When I started my freshman year of college as a journalism major, I figured that teaching would be kind of my fallback. I figured, well, if all else fails, I guess I'll just be a teacher. Like the old adage says, those who can't do, teach. When I switched my major to education sophomore year, I quickly realized that what I thought was the easy route took a lot more work than most anticipate. In a perfect world, every classroom would be exactly like the ones in education textbooks. But with the ever-evolving American education system, this usually isn't the case. Social and cultural change is what drives change in classroom culture and climate. And in order to keep up with the times, one of the most important traits for a new educator to have is adaptability. Adaptability, quite simply, comes from experience. Now, when a student doctor starts their residency, they already have countless hours of field observation under their belts. They've spent time on hospital floors and in doctors' offices. They've done observations. They've worked with both cadavers and live patients alike. Sometimes the first classroom experience that a future educator has is when they set foot in the classroom for their first day of student teaching, in the final semesters before they graduate. Now, I'd like to argue that teachers are just as important when it comes to raising a child as a doctor. In fact, teachers are some of the most important adults in a child's life. So why is there such a discrepancy? Why do we put more effort into getting experience for our doctors than our teachers? First, we'll look at some of the things that are changing these classrooms in the first place, that are causing the need for experienced future educators. One of the biggest and most prevalent is the evolution of technology. We have seen unprecedented technological growth in the past 20 years, and while this has provided many learning opportunities and resources for teachers to utilize, it doesn't come without its faults. One of the biggest is now that we are constantly competing for the attention of our students. According to University of California Irvine study, it takes 23 minutes to regain focus from receiving a smartphone notification. That's half an hour where we have to regain our undivided attention to the task at hand. It adds up after a while, and you begin to see how precious little focused learning time we get both in and out of the classroom. A very harmful effect that technology has had on our classroom culture has been cyberbullying. The spreading of hateful words and images across the internet now not only affects our older students, but as access to technology improves, now we are seeing young middle schoolers and sometimes even elementary schoolers that are the targets of cyberbullying. These hateful words and images oftentimes lead to hateful acts. On the forefront of many people's minds when it comes to what changes classroom culture and climate is the prevalence of violence in schools. Prior to Columbine, mention of violence in American schools was practically non-existent. Now it seems like we can't go more than a few weeks without hearing about a violent act in an American school. When people think of violence in schools and how it affects classroom culture and climate, they think of the precautionary measures. Metal detectors at school entrances, frosted glass on cafeteria windows so potential intruders can't see in, and clear backpacks so teachers can see what students are bringing into their classrooms. When I think of violence in schools, I think of a tweet I read once that said, quote, "American teachers cannot give their students Tylenol, but they're expected to perform combat medicine." This was attached to an article about how some teachers' preschool year training now includes how to staunch the blood flow from a bullet wound. Not only in our schools do we have to worry about those inflicting violence on others, at an alarming rate we are worrying about students who are inflicting harm upon themselves. From 2000 to 2007, the suicide rate in those ages 10 to 24 was 6.8 per 100,000. As of 2017, that number was 10.6. That's a rate that has almost doubled in less than 2 decades. And these heavier hitting topics are now the responsibility of teachers to tackle as the roles of parents change and family structures change. Now more than ever, we have students sitting in classrooms that are the product of single-parent homes, that are the product of foster homes, that have working parents who may not have time to not only help their children with their homework, but to discuss things like violence, cyberbullying, suicide. So it may seem like the odds are stacked against us. The world of education may seem like an impossible wall to climb. The key to success here really is experience. This means getting students in classrooms, doing observations, working with kids one-on-one, working in small groups, being a teacher's aide, all well before student teaching. Through Lakeland, I have spent countless hours in a variety of classrooms, doing observations, and I've also spent time in 2 separate second grade classrooms. And it has been some of the most helpful experience in shaping how I'm going to teach my future students. But there's another component. This could be working in a before or after school program, being a playground monitor, getting involved with a boys and girls club, a scouting organization, a youth group. Because when we look at kids outside of the classroom, we don't see them just as students. We see them as kids. We get to learn things about them as people, what their favorite movies and music are, what sports they like to play, about their siblings, their family, their history. No longer do we see them as just test scores on a page, we now see them as individuals. And that is one of the most important things a teacher can do, is make sure their students see that they know they're individuals. I spent 4 years working at a summer camp, and while I didn't formally learn a lick of teaching techniques or human growth and development, I learned some of the most important lessons I could ever learn when it comes to working with kids. 5 years from now, I'm going to be in my own classroom. And I hope my students know that I trust them on an individual level, so that they trust me to come to me for help with homework, if they're being bullied, to prevent tragedy. And this can start small. This could be as simple as attending a local school board meeting, suggesting a partnership with a local university, reaching out to those who are in charge of youth groups or scouting organizations and encouraging them to reach out to local universities. So, when you sit back and you think of the ed majors you see working in the campus center, cutting out their cute little shapes and thinking like I used to think, man, I really wish it were that easy. Because education goes so much further beyond the markers, the glue, the scissors. One of my favorite sayings of all time is that teaching is the profession that creates all others. The teachers of today are shaping the students of tomorrow into the next generation of successful adults. And I hope that with the right experience, arming teachers with that experience, we'll be able to help them with students for generations to come. Thank you.